What's going on, trader? And welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's your boy here, the Forex Amateur, and welcome back to another weekly Outlook video. So as you know, on a Monday, we like to go through the market, should I say, and look at the charts that obviously that I focus on, the instruments that I do trade, and break down what my forecast is for this week, what I'm hoping to see happening in the markets, and how I will be reacting to whatever happens. All right. So let's get straight into it. Before I do so, a little disclaimer. Remember, I'm not qualified to offer financial investment or trading advice, neither am I licensed to do so. Everything I speak about on these videos is purely my own opinion, right? I'm not qualified to, I do not recommend any specific trade or action, right? So if you do trade live funds, ensure that you do it with cash you are willing to risk, and you do your research on your side as well, your own analysis, look at the markets and whatever be the case. So let's get straight into the video for today. As you know, the format, we would simply go through the dollar index, Euro USD, which is the one currency that I'm currently basically focused on, not actively trading it as much, but I am very, very engaged with it. Then we'll move over to the volatility markets and focus on the synthetic indices, which is the three that I do trade. So let's talk about the dollar index. We did speak about the monthly view on the dollar index last week, about how I did see that we would see further downside on this market, right? I was expecting a bit of a pullback, which we obviously did see happening a little bit last week, right before we saw that immediate drop to the downside, right? Now, we did see the market recover last week as well, so the dollar did pull back a little bit, which is what I was speaking about as well. And we do see that came back pretty strong, and it's basically formed a lower high here in terms of structure. So let me grab a pen so that I can annotate on the chart directly. Okay, so as we've spoken, we've seen that break of structure. We've seen the lower low, lower high, lower low, and now we formed a lower high again last week. So what we would be expecting is for price to now come back below this low, right? Obviously, because in terms of structure, a bearish market makes lower highs and lower lows, right? Breaks previous lows, respects previous highs, right? So that's a bearish market. So in this instance here, we can see we are clearly bearish in this market, and we can see that the dollar is still pushing to the downside. If we go to, actually, let me actually zoom in a little bit more so you can actually see it. So you can see in here what I would be expecting for this week is I would simply be expecting this market to come back down into around this area. And if it does break below, my target would be somewhere around that low in there, right? Because that's that monthly low that we can see here, right? The next target would obviously be here on the monthly chart, but that's not something that we would expect to happen this week. So looking at the 4-hour chart on here, we can see that this is that lower high that was formed on the daily chart. Now, looking further into the bit of structure in here, we can see that price formed a higher high after breaking this high, after breaking this previous high, formed a higher low, and then failed to break this previous high, right? Now, some people would consider this a break of structure in terms of a wick, but for me, I have to see a candle body close above this level for me to, sorry, above this level for me to say that that is a break of structure. So in this instance here, this is still a lower high. This is equal highs in terms of this structure, and price has now broken the structure to the downside, showing us further bearish momentum on this time frame. Even though this dominant low is currently maintained, we would still expect price to come below there, and then obviously below the lows on the daily and the monthly chart, right? Looking at this for now, what I would expect on this 4-hour is once price breaks below here, I'll expect some sort of a pullback into around this area, and then most likely be looking for another sell in here. Perhaps I'll look for a buy in here, right? Another sell in here, back to the downside into around this area in here, and further back to the downside thereafter. So I think that pretty much covers dollar index for this week. Looking at the Euro USD chart, we did speak about Euro USD, that looking at it very, very, very carefully, you can see that we do have a lot of upside on this market, right? The first upside target on here would be this previous high, right? Because if we look in terms of structure, we've broken structure here, created higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low. What would we be expecting after a higher low forms in a clearly bullish market we would be expecting it to at least revisit this previous high, if not break it, right? So looking at this, this would be revisiting the previous high, and this would be our next target should it break through from there. So clearly our long-term bias on Euro USD should be bullish. So looking at our structure on daily, we can see pretty similar vibes in terms of how the market is moving. We've got this clear break of structure there, or you could consider that the break of structure. We've got a pullback and another break again to the upside, pullback, another break again to the upside. So clearly we are making higher highs and higher lows, and we're moving up to the upside, right? Clearly we are in a bullish market. We can see that this is a swing low that we formed here after this swing high, which formed this break of structure. So this would be one swing to the upside, another swing. This would be the pullback, sorry. And this would be the failure to create a higher high thereafter, right? So what this is now telling me is that I should expect this to either push to the upside or to maintain this level and give me a small pullback, perhaps into this previous low, before I expect it to go back to the upside, right? So dollar, we would be leaning very hard on dollar index to see what happens as well on dollar index, what the structure is on dollar index, how it does move moving forward. So if dollar index is bearish, we will expect Euro USD to continue bullish. When we look at the 4-hour chart, after looking at that, what we've seen on daily, we can see this clear level of demand in here, right? Where price came up, we had a rally that broke structure, we had a base that formed here, and we had another rally that broke another structure and the structure and that and all of that structure in there. So we're clearly bullish in a bullish leg on this specific push to the upside, right? We can see that this level was maintained, which would make this a higher low, right? And we'd expect price to at least come back to there and either break it or come back, revisit it, and drop, right? So that's very, very straightforward. That's obviously dependent on how fast each moves with each other. Because like I said, the dollar index and the Euro USD is a very, very strong correlation between the two of them. So let's not hold up on that for too long. Let's move on to the volatility index. Let's start with volatility 75 since we're on the chart anyway. This was my level on the monthly that I was looking for bearish momentum to step into the market. It actually happened much quicker than I would have wanted it to, right? Because as you can see in here on the daily chart, we don't necessarily have any clean sort of price action in here to tell us what's happening in this market. Now we can see we formed a high in there, obviously, formed a lower high here, formed a lower high here, broke previous low here, and broke previous low in there. So very clearly this market is moving to the downside at the moment on the daily chart, right? So we've got a very strong daily bearish momentum in this market, but we cannot forget the fact that we're coming off a strong bullish trend, right? On the monthly chart, you could even see it as well. We're coming off a strong bullish trend. We've got clear, strong bullish trend that formed in here, right? Strong bullish trend forming clear higher highs and higher lows. We can see that this last higher low and this last higher high will be our range, right? So obviously a break below, you're looking to go lower, or if it fails to break, you're looking to take it higher, right? That was a horrible drawing, but something to that effect. So what I will be focused on for now is I will be focused to see how price reacts when it gets to this previous low. So should it get to this previous low and start rejecting from here, then I would expect something like that, and I'd expect price to come back up either to this previous high or to break above this previous level in here to test this previous level of structure, right? So that's basically what I'm looking at. The volatility 75 right now is absolutely horrible to be trading, right? So just be sure that you do your analysis very, very thoroughly when you look at this market. Now, what I've been looking at in here, right, is I had this level in here. We can very clearly see that this was a higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, right? We can see that the last higher low in this market has been broken to the downside. So it's still showing that bearish momentum that we see on the daily chart, right? But what I would actually be expecting in this market is I would be expecting this level here to be retested at some point, whether it's after price breaks below this low, or whether it's when price comes to this low and maybe it pushes up into that area in there. So what I'm currently looking at the moment is I'm looking at what price will do in terms of when it gets to these areas in here. As you can see, it's already showing a reaction, and I'll probably be looking for something like, a pullback, maybe a retest, break of structure, and I'll be looking for something in there to take it to the upside, something to that effect. Obviously, first target will be up in here, right? And the next target will be up in here, and final targets will be up in this area in here. So that's basically straightforward what I'm looking at on volatility 75. Like I said, it's very, very shaky to trade right now. So just ensure that you do look very, very clearly at what you are um, putting on your charts. So looking at the weekly chart on volatility 10, the reason I came to the weekly chart is because I'm trading a weekly bias right now, right? So I'm looking at a weekly bias because I can see very clean structure to the downside on the weekly. Right here, lower high, and we can see price failing to make a lower low. Why do I say that? Because it failed to really break and hold this level, right? We do have a close of candles below it, but we failed to maintain, and then we've got a break of structure to the upside, creating a higher high, higher low in here, right? So very clearly we are in a bullish market, but we are expecting after a higher high is formed in a bullish market, what would you expect to happen? You would expect a higher low to come back and form for price to respect this levels. And here, go back and watch the market structure video where I speak about this very clearly. This would be your zone that you would be focused on, right? And you'd be looking for something to the upside from there. So very similarly, very similarly, this would be the zone that you'd be looking at for price to come back into. And then based on what it does in here, if it breaks to the downside, obviously, then that zone becomes null and void. It's not a bullish trend. But if it does react from there, then obviously you're looking to take this market back to the upside, targeting all of these levels in here. All right, so that's a bit of a long-term prognosis, but that's what I was looking at on the weekly chart, basically just breaking it down. So looking at the daily chart, obviously we know that we're at that area where we're looking to reverse from, right? Because remember, this yellow line, what does it mean? It's my pivot point. It's where I generally expect the market to pivot off of, right? So if we're in a bullish trend, we become bearish at that point. If we're in a bearish trend, we become bullish at that point. So looking at this area in here, we can see prices basically consolidating in this area here. I do not trade this type of a market. I need to see very clear structure on here. So I wouldn't really have, as you can see, even on this daily chart, I really don't have any analysis on here, right? Because there's nothing I'm really looking at in here. What we can, however, highlight on this chart in here is that we've got this higher high, higher low, and you can say this is the last higher high in here, because that would be the high, that would be a double top, and then price is just triple top at there, right? So that's just the swing high. So we can see that that was our last high in there. So we're either going to come back from a higher low and go higher, right? But remember, we're on that weekly pivot point, so we'll expect this to actually break down and give us something like that, maybe to the downside, maybe somewhere in here, and we'll be looking to take that, maybe a retest, and then go back to the downside. Excuse me, sorry. Go to the upside, because we are in an overall bullish trend. So we'll expect price to come back to around these areas in here and look for some level of demand in here, and it will go back to the upside because we are in an overall bullish trend. So looking at the H4, what do we see on the H4? We can see that, okay, here we've got this last break of structure to the upside. We've got another break of structure to the upside. So that's our last higher low. That's why I have an arrow there, and that's our last higher high. Clearly, we are in a bullish trend, right? Because we've broken structure to the upside. What will we expect? We'll expect this. Now that we've formed a higher low sort of in here, we'll expect price to now sort of make its way back to the upside, breaking above that high. Excuse my drawing. Breaking above that high, right? So what I'm looking at on here right now is we've got a nice break of structure here to the upside. We do know that that's a higher low compared to that previous low. We now know that that is a higher high. So we'll expect price to form a higher low in around here, and we'll expect it to push to the upside from that level. Once we have a break of structure here, we do know that we can continue holding our buys to the upside, and we can continue perhaps looking for further entries to the upside from there. Moving on to volatility 100, we had a beautiful, before I get into my outlook, we had a beautiful setup that we shared with the group last week. Why do I say we? It's myself. That I shared with the group last week, looking at this level in here. As you know, I've been looking at overall sales on volatility 100, and you can see that we've had an arrow saying that it would come back into this area in here. And as you can see that it has tapped into that area. So this was a very, very beautiful setup that we did share with the group. So that's beautiful. Anyway, getting back to the point of today's video, looking at the weekly chart, as you know, very strong bearish buys. I've been talking about bearish sells back into these areas in here, back into these areas in here on volatility 100. I did share a setup with the group about 2 weeks back, looking at from around this level in here on the weekly chart, pushing to the downside. So I'll probably maybe share that on IG perhaps later on, so that you can have a look at that as well. So I have been expecting strong bearishness in this market for a while now. As you can see, we've formed a high, low, right? Higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high. And as you can see, it's a very strong bearish momentum. So generally, you would expect a higher low to form somewhere in here because you're in a bullish market, right? But I'm expecting this market to turn around and go bearish. So I'll be expecting this level to break, which will give me a lower low, and then I'll be expecting a lower high to form somewhere in here and continue taking this market to the downside. Cool, so that's very straightforward. Moving on to the daily chart, as you can see on here as well, we did have this last level of structure in here. We formed that higher. I wouldn't necessarily consider this a lower low because it didn't necessarily create a lower high, right? So I actually consider this one leg to the downside. So this would have been my lower low. This is my lower high. Sorry, my lower high, and I am expecting price to break this low, come back to here, and then come back to here, somewhere around here, and then we'll be looking for something to pull back from there, perhaps not that deep, excuse me, but something from there to pull back. So just focusing in on this week, I'll be expecting to see price just sort of make its way to the downside, even if it comes into around here, gives us a slight pullback, comes into here, gives us a slight pullback, just sort of make its way to the downside. And once it gets down into here, then we'll start be looking for something to the upside from there. Looking at that, let's drop down to the 4-hour. I don't necessarily think there's not much I can speak about on the 4-hour, except the fact that we had this last break to the downside here, right? What we'd expect now is we can see prices forming some sort of a double bottom in here. What I would expect, however, is for price to come down a bit deeper into this level and then give me some sort of a confirmation in here, and we can look to take something to the upside back into around this area in here, right? Or even higher than that. Who knows what happens? So that's my outlook of the markets for this week. I hope you've been able to get some information out of that, some education if possible. Until next time, it has been a pleasure as always to share with you guys, and I am wishing you a blessed and a profitable trading